It's June 1st, 2025, and something strange is happening to Russia's cellular networks. Across 3 of Russia's 11 time zones, a simple electronic signal delivered via compromised cell phone towers kicks off what will become the boldest paramilitary operation of the 21st century. At the end of the day, Russia won't just be humiliated, its very ability to credibly threaten NATO with war will be significantly eroded, or worse, destroyed. Ukraine is about to inflict over $7 billion in damage to Russia, while spending only a few million to do it. The Ukrainian attack on Russian airfields on June 1st didn't just take the world by complete surprise, it blindsided even Kyiv's closest allies, dealt Russia its most expensive defeat since World War II, and rewrote the rules of warfare. So how did Operation Spider's Web go down? Was it really as effective as claimed? And why is the United States scrambling to redirect billions of dollars in funding and acquisitions as a result? It's the kind of attack military analysts should have seen coming, a full-scale attack on very expensive Russian assets deep behind the front lines using cheap, disposable drone munitions. Despite many details still remaining highly classified, through open-source intelligence, a picture of the events leading up to the attacks and the true fallout is starting to emerge. And it is one of precision, planning, and fallout that Moscow still isn't ready to admit. The goal was simple: strike Russia hard exactly where it least expected it, exploiting a glaring security vulnerability to inflict a devastatingly lopsided strategic and economic defeat. But the actual assets struck weren't by accident. In fact, it is clear that Ukraine knew exactly what it was doing and was very carefully choosing what to strike and what not to strike. And that careful deliberation may have been designed to avert nuclear war. But let's rewind and start at the beginning. It's 2023, exactly 18 months and 9 days before the attack. According to President Zelensky himself, this is when the Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, began preparations for a Trojan horse attack on Russian bombers. While it's now been called a modern Pearl Harbor, this is actually not a good comparison. Pearl Harbor was ultimately a strategic failure, so Operation Spider's Web is best compared to the Battle of Taranto, a battle that raged through the night of November 11th and 12th in 1940. The British set out to cripple the Italian fleet and prevent it from threatening Allied naval power in the Mediterranean. The attack was a huge success, with the highlight being the crippling of 3 Italian battleships and the shift of naval power toward the Allies. This would have direct implications not immediately realized for the war in Africa, and as we'll later learn in this video, this too is likely to be yet another historical mirror between the 2 operations. Throughout the war, Ukraine has been hammered by long-range missile attacks launched by Russian bombers. These attacks have primarily been aimed at civilian and energy infrastructure, the former being yet another blatant war crime carried out by Russian forces with impunity. Russia has several models of air-launched cruise missiles, all of them with ranges over 600 miles, putting the aircraft launching them well out of range of air defenses. This has forced Ukraine to constantly shoot arrows rather than shooting the archers themselves, a problem made worse by the collapse in support from key allies and the ever-shrinking stockpile of air defense missiles and platforms. The goal then was to target long-range Russian strategic aviation, inflicting a disproportionate economic defeat and reducing Russia's ability to conduct long-range attacks. To this aim, the primary targets would be Russia's Tu-95 and Tu-22 strategic bombers, responsible for carrying out almost daily missile attacks against civilians. Interestingly, it appears that the Tu-160 bombers were specifically not targeted in the attack. This is significant as the Tu-160 has historically served as a central component of Russia's nuclear deterrent strategy, similar to the airborne nuclear patrols conducted by the United States during the early to mid-Cold War period. This may have been a bit of a political messaging to both Russia and Ukraine's allies. By deliberately avoiding strikes on nuclear-capable bombers, Ukraine appeared to be reinforcing its commitment to maintaining the nuclear status quo. To Russia, this message was even more specific. Ukraine was not targeting strategic aircraft that up to this point had not been employed in the war effort against it. If this theory is correct, Russia opted to then make these aircraft future targets by immediately using them in place of its destroyed Tu-95s and Tu-22 bombers to strike back at Ukraine. What is known is that the Tu-160s would be left untouched despite other aircraft burning to ash around them. The means of the attack were obvious, the same quadcopter drones used with such great success to stem the Russian onslaught. But even this needed to be carefully managed because using the wrong drones could spell disaster for Ukraine. The bulk of Ukraine's drones are bought from Chinese companies, which is why China, in support of Russia, announced it would limit the sale of drones to Ukraine and other Western countries. But using a Chinese or even allied nation drone in such a high-profile attack inside of Russia could prove politically sensitive. Thus, Ukraine decided to use its own drones, ensuring that every single aspect of this attack from planning to the weapons used remained 100% Ukrainian. Ukraine would have to figure out how to get the drones into Russia, though. Initially, planners likely considered simply buying Russian drones. That came with a big problem. Per Russian legislation, any drone over half a pound had to be registered, and buying drones in bulk wouldn't just create possible suspicion, but be complicated due to enforcement of Russian drone laws. The drones would have to be smuggled in, but this came with its own set of challenges. Cargo coming into Russia regularly undergoes inspection, and a massive shipment of drones would require an extensive paper trail. Just one more opportunity for authorities to uncover the operation. As of now, it's still not known just how Ukraine smuggled the drones into Russia, save that it was done with each drone in pieces. Inside of Russia, Ukrainian operatives worked in rented warehouses, secretly assembling 117 kamikaze drones. The explosives that the drones would carry needed to be smuggled in too, a process that likely took months to accomplish without raising suspicion inside a well-known to be paranoid security state. This likely took up a large amount of the year and a half that the operation took to pull off. According to an official post by the Ukrainian government, most of it was planned from an office within sight of the headquarters of Russia's own security agency, the FSB, in Moscow. Meanwhile, operatives engaged in two further separate efforts to guarantee success. The first would also take place inside Russia. Ukrainian operatives repeatedly drove across the Russian countryside as they planned targets and the routes the drones and the drone carriers would have to take to their targets. As far as targets, it's believed that 5 airbases were chosen: Belaya, Diagileva, Ivanovo-Severny, Olynya, and Ukrainka. Belaya is a key base for Russia's aerospace forces' long-range aviation, situated in the Irkutsk Oblast all the way in southeastern Siberia. It's home to 2 bomber regiments, both flying the Tu-22, and it's a key strategic hub for deterring conflict with China. Located 2,500 miles from Ukraine, the base affords a safe passage for Russian bombers to stage from, well out of range of missiles or even Ukraine's longest-range drones. The Agileva Air Base is located in the Ryazan Oblast, very close to Ukraine in western Russia. The base is home to a major aircraft repair factory, and during the war in Ukraine, played a host to a large number of Tu-95 bombers. It's already been struck in a previous long-range drone attack that destroyed a fuel truck and damaged a Tu-22 bomber, which made the success of the Spider's Web attack that much more infuriating for Russian military observers. Ivanovo-Severny, also located in western Russia, is primarily home to a large number of Russia's A-50 airborne early warning and control craft. 2 of these aircraft would end up being damaged in the Ukrainian attack, though there's a strong reason to believe these, along with other A-50s on site, are being cannibalized for parts and not fit for service. Olynya Air Base, actually a part of the Russian Navy, is a key airfield and one of 9 staging facilities for a nuclear attack over the North Pole and into the United States. At the time of the attack, it's believed the airbase hosted 2 160s as a part of their nuclear mission, along with 2 95s used to carry out conventional attacks against Ukraine. Located in the Murmansk Oblast, with the ascension of Sweden and Finland to NATO, Olynya is a very strategically important base for the Russian Air Force, and likely why Ukraine attacked it. Ukrainka Air Base, located in the Amur Oblast in the Russian Far East, was a surprise target for many. The base plays a critical role in supporting the airborne leg of Russia's nuclear triad. Its strategic bombers serve as a deterrent against both the US and China. As one of Russia's largest military installations, it houses a fleet of heavy bombers, making it a prime target for Ukrainian strikes. With targets identified, the next challenge was delivery. The quadcopters used in the attacks had a limited range, just a few kilometers. To be effective, they had to be transported close to the airfields before launch, exposing Ukrainian drone operators to unacceptably high risks. To counter this, Ukraine opted to simply not have the operators nor even any agent involved in the Spider's Web anywhere near the targets or even inside of Russia. Ukraine has used satellite internet throughout this war with Russia, but Starlink has all of Russia geofenced, and so Ukrainian drone operators wouldn't be able to rely on it. Instead, Ukraine turned to Russia's own cellular telephone network, in effect hijacking it by simply installing SIM cards into each drone. This would allow Ukrainian operators well outside of Russia to link up to their drones and even pilot them, with the cell network capable of handling high-definition video feeds. This removed the problem of getting operators close enough to strike, but not the drones themselves. The solution to this problem came in the form of trucks. Commercial freight vehicles are a common sight on the Russian highways, unlikely to raise suspicion even when parked near a Russian airfield. Their trailers provided plenty of space to hide drones and the gear needed to control them. But any truck on Russian roads risked inspection, so the SBU got creative, designing special trailers for the mission. Some looked like ordinary cargo haulers, while others were disguised as prefabricated homes, a common sight across Russia. But the real trick was hidden above. Instead of storing drones inside, the operatives installed a false roof, just a few inches thick. At the right moment, explosive bolts would blow the top off, revealing a swarm of up to 36 drones ready to launch straight into the sky. From there, they would head directly toward their targets completely undetected. To any Russian inspector, the trailers would look perfectly ordinary. Ukraine also installed explosives into the walls of the trailers themselves. This would trigger after a successful delivery of the drones, or if the trailer itself was tampered with. With the trailers destroyed, Russia's FSB would be left with little to no clue about how Ukraine pulled off the operation or how future attacks might be carried out. In fact, video evidence shows at least one Russian entering a booby-trapped trailer after delivery of its drones, moments before the trailer explodes with him in it. As the special trailers were being altered or manufactured, Ukrainian operatives opened up a fake shipping company inside of Russia itself. Allegedly, Artem Timofeyev, a former DJ, relocated to Chelyabinsk and opened a fake shipping company through which the trucks used in the attack were registered. It's believed that he and his wife were instrumental in developing the operation and are now in hiding. Shortly after the attack, Russia made a big show of arresting several drivers of the trucks used in the attack. However, according to the SBU, the drivers were independent contractors, with no clue of what their cargo was. Each driver had simply been told to deliver their trailer to a specified location, where they were either told to simply leave the trailer or wait for someone else to retrieve it. These drop-off points were within striking range of each Russian airfield. In footage captured by bystanders, one driver can be seen running in panic as his truck suddenly releases a swarm of drones into the sky. The fact that the Russian authorities eventually released the drivers suggests that they were likely unaware of their role. With delivery methods and locations secured, Ukraine worked on the problem of controlling so many drones remotely. While it had been decided to use Russia's own cell network, this wasn't without its problems. Latency meant that there would be a few seconds signal delay for the furthest away attacks, literally on the other side of the planet from Ukraine in the Russian Far East. Spotty cell signals near military airfields and possible electronic countermeasures could also cause performance issues, so Ukraine took to AI to solve its piloting problem. While according to Ukrainian sources every single drone had a dedicated pilot, it is known that the drones also made use of AI or autopilots in case of signal loss. Ardu Pilot, an open-source autopilot program developed by hobbyists and adopted commercially, allows for planning out a drone's flight plan and then executing it without human control. It uses 3D waypoints and all manner of navigation sensors such as traditional GPS and rangefinders to help a drone find its way and remain stable in flight. It's especially useful to Ukraine due to its ability to help drones navigate even in GPS-denied environments. AI would have to take the co-pilot's seat, though, in case of a loss of signal. To do this, it was trained to guide a drone directly to its target and detonate its payload. The system had to learn how to identify Russian aircraft and pinpoint their most vulnerable spots for their small explosive payload. According to sources, decommissioned Tu-22M bombers on display at the Poltava Museum of Long-Ranged and Strategic Aviation, opened in 2007, were used as visual references. It's unclear what other materials were used to model the rest of the Russian fleet. What is known from video released by the SBU, however, is that the drones consistently targeted known weak spots in Russian aircraft, such as the wing gas tanks or locations of very expensive and sensitive electronics. With all the pieces in play, the attack was finally given the green light. According to the SBU, over 40 Russian aircraft were hit, though visual evidence only accounts for a portion of that. As of early June 2025, the SBU continues to release additional footage from the operation, making the ultimate tally of struck aircraft unknown and unverifiable. Video evidence from the attacks also shows that some of the aircraft were actually armed with Kh-101 cruise missiles, meaning that they were being prepared for yet another large attack on Ukraine's civilians. Other footage, like the strikes on Russia's A-50 airborne early warning and control aircraft, reveals some targets were already missing engines. These airframes were likely being cannibalized for parts, as sanctions have pushed Russia's aircraft maintenance capabilities to the brink. By targeting these planes, Ukraine further drained the limited pool of replacements for Russia's active fleet. In some cases, drones hit the radar domes of the A-50s directly, evidence that Ukraine knew exactly where to strike to inflict maximum damage on Russia's warfighting capability. At Olynia, confirmed losses so far include 4 Tu-95 bombers and 1 An-12 transport plane. At Ivanovo, drones are confirmed landing and presumably exploding on the radar domes of 2 A-50s. Their worn condition, however, casts into doubt if these aircrafts were operational or simply being repurposed. At Belaya Air Base, visual evidence confirms the destruction of 3 Tu-95 bombers, with a fourth possibly damaged. 1 Tu-22 was clearly destroyed, while 3 others appear to have been heavily damaged or destroyed. At Diaghilevo, there is no visual evidence of destroyed aircraft. The truck carrying the drones to attack Ukrainka might have suffered a malfunction, as it caught fire and then exploded before its drones could be deployed. It's believed that Russian air defenses were operational at some of the airfields struck, but the small size of the drones and built-in radar filters would have made it difficult to target them. In order to avoid false alarms, radar systems often employ special filters that weed out things such as birds. With their small size, low altitude, and speed, Ukrainian drones could have been misidentified by air defense radar filters and thus not engaged. It appears that at least some of the drones were successfully intercepted or brought down via electronic warfare systems. Overall, Operation Spider's Web was a massive success for a number of different reasons. The attack was so terrifying to military planners that the United States immediately repurposed anti-drone munitions meant for Ukraine to its own forces in the Middle East. The first way that the operation was a massive success was in the simple cost exchange. Details remain classified, but it is likely that Operation Spider's Web cost Ukraine no more than a few $1,000,000, and the bulk of that would have been the cost of covertly operating inside of Russia. The drones themselves were no more than a few $100s apiece. In exchange, these drones either destroyed or damaged aircraft valued at hundreds of millions of dollars apiece, with estimated damage as of the writing of this script hovering around $7 billion. It's very possible that this makes Operation Spider's Web the most cost-effective attack in history. But the real economic cost to Russia goes far beyond the loss of a few airframes. The Tu-95s and Tu-22s targeted by Ukraine haven't been in production since the Cold War. There's simply no direct replacement for them. Restarting production would be economically unrealistic. Russia would be spending hundreds of millions of dollars just to build outdated Cold War capabilities. To add insult to injury, Russia has been modernizing its Tu-95 fleet since 2021, so it's likely that at least some, if not all, of the bombers destroyed had just undergone costly upgrades before being turned into smoldering wrecks. This is a permanent loss to Russia's Air Force, as there is simply no way to replace these aircraft. The only strategic bomber in production today is the Tu-160, and even that is using a mix of Soviet-era equipment left in reserve to produce new airframes. Production remains extremely limited, with only about 2 aircraft completed per year since 2022. And while the Tu-160 is a capable bomber, it's not a practical replacement for the Tu-95. Given the highly specialized equipment involved, such as that to enable vacuum welding titanium, the revamped production line producing the Tu-160s can't simply be repurposed to replace Russia's losses of other airframes. Ukraine estimates that Russia has lost 34% of its strategic cruise missile carriers in the attack, and that isn't coming back anytime soon. It could be decades before Russia recovers from this devastating attack, given its incredibly poor economy and the effect of sanctions, compounded by all the other equipment it needs to replace from its losses in Ukraine. 34% might not sound like that much, but it's important to remember that not all aircraft are available to fly at any one time. Aircraft require extensive maintenance, and as a rule of thumb, only half of your fleet is ever available for combat at any one time. To figure out the real cost to Russian aviation, we need to know how many aircraft were destroyed, how many remain, and then half the remaining amount, and that's how many bombers the Russian Air Force has available for combat. Even damaged aircraft may end up being a total loss. It's believed that the warheads used by Ukraine's drones only weighed a few pounds. It's hardly enough to destroy massive bomber aircraft on their own, especially those bombers with little to no fuel in their tanks at the time of the attack. However, strikes against sensitive systems or parts of the aircraft no longer in production could mean that the entire airframe is now out of commission, only available to be cannibalized to keep other aircraft flying. But only Russia knows how many of the damaged aircraft will never fly again, at least until the inevitable leaks. Just ask the Der Spiegel reporters who recently reviewed over 2 million classified Russian documents related to its nuclear weapons program. On June 1, 2025, Ukraine reshaped the very nature of modern warfare and sent a chill down the spine of defense officials around the world. Nations with fleets of expensive warplanes, once thought safe on the airfields far from the front lines, suddenly found themselves vulnerable in ways they had never imagined. Ukraine both inflicted a permanent strategic defeat to Russia and put the entire world on alert that it too could suffer a similar fate with absolutely no warning. Think Ukraine's missions are bold? They've got company, from spy games to secret coups. See how the US operates in the shadows, and 10 craziest CIA covert operations. Or click on this video instead.